This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through the beautiful Roswell Pro Audio Aztec tube microphone, mixed through Isotope, Ozone, RX, and Neutron, all on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. Also, please remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I always just think of it, it's a game engine,
right? Okay.
But defining that beyond, for a non-game audience, you do art, you do your art, your code, your audio now, everything that makes up a game, you bring into a game engine,
right? And when game engine also sort of implies that when you play the game itself is using that same software to run that engine. It's almost like if we were making music for Pro Tools sessions, and then when somebody listened to it, they opened it up in a Pro Tools session to listen to the music, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the software.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle, featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects. Perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro and AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lij Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Steve Pardo, a highly accomplished music composer, music director, and game audio specialist with over 15 years crafting immersive music and sound for award-winning games and globally recognized franchises. Steve is the co-founder of Skew Sound, composer and music manager at Probably Monsters, and an active performing artist based in Nashville, Tennessee. Steve's career began at the legendary Harmonix Music Systems, where he worked on iconic titles like Rock Band VR, Dance Central, and Fantasia Music Evolved. He's since contributed to games such as Fortnite Festival, Cypher, 007, Moonbreaker, and Signs of the Sojourner. And his music also appears on platforms like Netflix, Adult Swim, and IFC. And he's collaborated on cutting-edge projects involving generative and AI-driven music for companies like MasterCard, Warner Music, and Tribeca Film Festival. A graduate of the University of Miami, Steve earned both a bachelor's degree in studio music and jazz and a master's degree in studio jazz writing, grounding his creative work in a rich foundation of jazz and orchestration. Steve's Nashville studio is equipped with a 714 Atmos system, boutique microphones, synthesizers, and lots of instruments, allowing him to create very cool music in a cozy setting. Please welcome Steve Pardo to Recording Studio Rockstars. Steve?
Thank you so much for having me, Lij.
Welcome to the studio. Dude, are you ready to rock?
I'm totally ready to rock.
It's great to have you, man. Thanks for your patience, of course. Now that we are moving over to video,
this is amazing.
A little extra time to get everything rolling. And of course, there's like the false start followed by the real start.
Love it. I love it. Yeah.
So let's see. This is sort of this is a pretty tiny home studio. You have a pretty cozy home studio setting too. Yours is bigger than this, so it's got to be bigger than this.
It's a 15 by 15 space. Yeah. And good enough for, I didn't build it out to be more than just a personal space, So I was able to optimize it to have just the right amount of instruments, just the right amount of gear, microphones, drums, guitars, woodwinds. for myself. And then every time, every once in a while I'll have a vocalist over, or I'll have a drummer over, or a bass player, and I'll immediately start to feel like, oh no, like this is not an appropriately spaced session or a studio for a session outside of just me solo. So I don't really market it much beyond just as a personal space. Yeah.
Right. Well, you've sort of designed it so that it's really easy for you to work, because
Right.
you have to do a lot of work in there. When
I
you're
love
making music.
collaborating. It's one of the reasons I moved here for the game projects that I work on. But yeah, honestly, 95% of the music that I'm working on is me solo. Yeah, for sure. So,
And, part of that is wanting to set up a studio environment where you can just reach for an instrument and it's not too much of a pain to get something going, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of flow that I thrive in. And it like also helps me determine what game projects I want to say yes to, because that's just my happy place, is to kind of compose music and produce music that I know is mostly going to me. I mean, composers nowadays have access to crazy boutique libraries, symphonic libraries, orchestral libraries, where they can, really do a complete high quality AAA Hollywood level score without the need for any live instruments. There's some tricks around that to kind of level it up, depending on your budget. But I prefer to start from the complete opposite space, if at all possible, where it's all live. It's no sample libraries. It's tactile instruments. It's you hear the breath coming out of the mouthpiece on a woodwind.
Well, especially for you, as a woodwind player. So saxophone is woodwind, right?
That's right. Yeah,
and that always refers to the reed.
That's right.
Is wood.
And also just the mechanism and the approach for how you perform on the instrument.
Saxophone was one of those instruments that almost never was, right? Isn't it? Doesn't it have like kind of a crazy history of like the guy who invented it, invented like tons of failed instruments, and then finally
Adolph Sax. Yeah. I just saw a post from somebody, a tribute post from my friend Phil Doyle, just like a reminder that this is sort of like, the forgotten child, of at least, for a long time it was. And then it got resurrected, when the music kind of met the need for that type of horn, right? I fell in love with the instrument when I heard Charlie Parker when I was a kid. And there are people before then that, Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins for sure, that brought the instrument to the forefront. But Charlie Parker for me was like, that was a revelation for the entire, people that were playing jazz back then. And I'll never forget like listening to Yardbird Suite and Confirmation and all those bebop classics, and really falling in love with it around sixth grade, I think. Yeah, so it must have been like.
Well, it's a fascinating story. I mean, we'll come back and dive more into the studio stuff, but let's talk a little bit about your story arc from being interested in music to finding yourself doing all this game design stuff. To me, it's a really unusual combination that you've landed on. So you have this classic interest in jazz. You went to University of Miami and studied there. Oddly enough, my uncle was president of U of M for 20 years, Tad Foote. Yeah, long time ago.
What a random quote. That's crazy.
I don't know if that was while you were there. It's probably before.
No, yeah.
Donna
Shalala was the president back. Yeah, that's amazing.
So I, when I was going to school, going to U of M was a possible option too. And I ended up going to MTSU and coming to Nashville.
Yeah.
But like, the classic jazz study. So my brother's a jazz musician too. I always loved jazz when I was in high school. And for a long time, I thought that was the serious. If you didn't do classical music and you were serious about music, you would choose jazz.
What other option do you have?
It never occurred to me that like pop music and rock and roll was serious at the time.
Music education for the win, right?
Yeah. But it seems like also when you decide to study something like that, the classic move might be something like my brother did, which is you just move to New York and you become a gigging jazz musician and you focus on that. Yet you somehow found this great crossover to keep that going stylistically and also enter into the, what's now in the music world, which is doing modern stuff and sound design and game.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think I learned that about myself while I was in school, that I wasn't going to follow that traditional path where you move to New York and you try to, cut in and jam sessions and, kind of move up that sort of ladder in that way. Even though that was what I thought I was going to do going into school, was just be a saxophone player and, have
You're going to be
be
at Smalls at 2 a.m. every night.
I still that's still a dream for me to, I looked back at that idea romantically still. And some of my favorite musicians still that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're there but yeah, I think that something happened in the middle of my tenure as an undergrad where I just fell in love with music production, and so much so that it forced me to go even back to like what I was doing when I was in grade school and be like, I've always loved music production. I was writing music in this Super Nintendo game, Mario Paint, when I think I was 8 or 9 when that came out, or first or second grade, where I initially really fell in love. It had a little sequencer. I don't know if you know that game, but it has an actual music sequencer
in the game.
Wow. Yeah, and the game was like an art, like, Microsoft Paint, but for Super Nintendo kind of thing. But it had a sequencer, and then from there, fast forward a few more years, my mom was a early adopter of MIDI music production, and she had like an old Atari PC and a ADAT recording studio, and I was like watching her build out this studio and being like, I want to do that. That sounds fun. And so she
where were you growing up?
Chicago.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So and again, hence the jazz thing. Their jazz scene there was always a big part of my visibility into music. But yeah, so she was into more the classical piano side of things, but she was producing children's music records as a singer, vocalist. So had her home studio, equivalent to what we try to do, here. But in that world, it was all ADAT, and she had a big Mackie mixer, and she had a 414. I'll never forget that 414, which I still have today. She lent it to me, and now I own it.
Wow.
So that's
it's a BLULS.
ULS, yeah. It's an awesome microphone.
I've got one of those. Mine has a little bit of a funky switch, so.
Oh, really?
So if I use it, it sounds great, but it probably means it's like, why don't we have any mics in? I got to go out there and wiggle the switch.
That's still I probably use that microphone. I don't have like a, U47, U67. My 414 is my large diaphragm, my go-to large diaphragm. Yeah. So, anyway, I was using an old Mac computer. I don't remember the Mac, but I was doing MIDI stuff in early high school, and then my dad bought me a Tascam digital recorder, one of the first ones. Was using that to make records and stuff. And then when I went to school, got an M-Box, got into Pro Tools, fell in love with Logic, and then started releasing, stuff in Logic. And something about that was where I really fell in love with music production.
Once you got Logic and started
Logic 7. Yeah.
And what age were you at that point?
I was maybe 20. Yeah.
It's a good age to click.
Yeah.
It's like 20 is when you kind of don't have to listen to anybody else, and you can do what you want all the time, potentially, and stay up all night.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually got married that year too.
Nice,
so there was like a mix of like, oh, I have to be more responsible than just, a saxophone player. It's like that trajectory. I need to like have a job at some point. So that was like sort of in the back of my mind. Like I want to have health insurance and be somewhat more, because it's not just me anymore.
Yeah. Do you think there's an inherent feeling of that growing up in a place like Chicago where winters are cold and vicious, and you're like, so there's a part of you that's always prepping for prepping the larder.
Yeah. That's interesting. I haven't thought about it like that, but no, I think I was always pulled back into jazz, and I still am. Like that jazz mindset, that it's so punk in a way.
Yeah.
That it keeps me real. It keeps me wanting to just be a musician and make music and, hang out with my friends. And
there's a lot of opportunity for art rock in jazz.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that the term jazz is loaded, right?
Yeah.
But really what it is instrumental art rock. At least that's how the jazz that I make. That's how I
and I like the style of music you make a lot.
Thanks.
It's cool stuff. And so Rockstars, we have a link to the playlist for Steve's music right in the show notes. So if you want to go check it out, it's everything from compositions for games, stuff that makes you, sort of evokes a mood and makes you wonder, I wonder what scene this accompanies. And we'll talk about that stuff too. And it's also stuff that you're also doing pop music. Is Amy? Is that your wife?
That's my wife. Yeah.
Great. And so you guys have made some records together as well.
Yeah, we've made quite a few. Yeah. Yeah. Amy is a flute player by nature, but that's limiting her talents and her musical output. So we do a couple projects together. We have one called Tweet Tweet, which is her songwriting, and actually not. I think it's actually more of a collaborative, but she's singing. And then on our most recent record, we brought in her sister, Lindley Cameron, who we've collaborated a bunch over the years. Actually, as long as I've known her, we've been making music together. Lindley is Amy's sister.
Is that the Three Busy Debras album?
Oh yeah, that's a different project. Yeah,
That's
I don't think she appears on that one. Yeah, that's a different. That's actually one of the actors on the show singing those songs.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I think Tweet Tweet, and then even some of our children's records, and then even before then, we were doing a band called Opal Puckett with my brother, and gave me a chance to work on sort of music production outside of the game space. So a chance for me to kind of get more comfortable in my skin, making the kind of music I still make, like folk, rock, jazz, inspired cinematic music for games and TV shows. So
and I feel like listening to your discography, I feel like the folk aspect has to do with your ability to play acoustic instruments too. So you play
guitar,
you fingerpick guitar, you got stuff like that, but you play cello too.
Yeah, I have a little cello on my fingers. Sure.
Yeah. Do you have a violin? Do you play violin?
I do every once in a while. Yeah. I and those are.
And then, of course, the woodwinds.
Yeah, woodwinds are my main for sure. Because I, started with saxophone, flute, and clarinet. Are that's still like my arsenal.
So, like when you started learning these other ones, you're like, "What do you mean it's not in the key of B flat or whatever?" Right? Is that the way it goes?
I still have a longing for everything to be in a flat key, especially D flat. But
I still have no clue what that even means. I just know it exists.
Oh, funny!
I never, I didn't do the study music thing, so.
It's Duke Ellington. That's all. Like, I listen to Duke Ellington. My favorite songs of Duke Ellington are the key of D flat, and that just carried over to like.
That's wild.
Yeah, I think the entire soundtrack for Signs of the Sojourner was done in the key of D flat.
Oh, that's interesting. So I think about James Brown. He's always talks about down D, funky D. Like you're going down from the. E. You think of guitar world, you sort of think of E as your fundamental chord.
Yeah.
For some reason, I guess, and then D is dropping it lower, so
that's
D flat's
funny.
even lower, right?
Well, that actually was part. I would tune down my guitar to be in the key of D flat.
Yeah.
Actually,
and then if you want to be really bold, you go all the way down to C. If you're in like,
I have two guitars that are permanently tuned to the key of C. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, they're like baritone-ish guitars at this point. There's a rubber bridge guitar.
Yeah. Is that local Nashville? There's somebody in Nashville who's making them.
Yeah, that's my buddy John Estes.
John Estes. Oh, great.
Yeah. He makes them for folks all around town.
Yeah, I think Roger Allen Nichols had one in his place, and he showed it to me, and I was like, "Man, that sounds great."
I'm using it
It's like one of these
now.
right here. I don't know if it's probably.
Yeah. What he does, or what he recommends people
but it's
do.
Kind of like one of these Silvertone, or is this a Silvertone? Yeah, flat.
Like a parlory.
Yeah, parlory.
Yeah. So the one that he does that he recommends people do if they don't have that guitar just lying around, or a parlor just lying around, is the Gretsch. What's it called? Jim Dandy? Is that what it is? He takes those and he sets them up, and they're amazing. So I'm literally using it right now on a song for a game called Grim Dawn. It has like a cello quality. Like
so
a
rubber bridge means that it doesn't have much sustain, which these guitars don't have a ton of sustain to begin with. But it gives it like a boing kind of cool, like great for finger picking, right?
Great for finger picking.
Yeah, and then it also, the way they're building them is he's got a coil pickup.
That's right.
In the actual.
He installs it. Yeah.
So then you can put that into an amp or something like that.
Yeah, I run it through my pedal boards. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool, man. That's
cool. It's a vibe machine for sure, and they're a little. They were kind of having a heyday with I can't remember the songwriter, but Phoebe Bridgers was one of them, Taylor Swift. But I use it for game stuff. It just has a really warm, eclectic kind of tone. And so if you want to do a pizzicato sound, but have it not be a pizzicato, have it be sort of mysterious in this middle place, then it's perfect. And you just put it through a bunch of reverb and Chase Bliss pedals, and then you're good to go.
What was it? Well, Chase Bliss pedals. Is that what we got to talk pedals.
Yeah. Oh boy, here we go.
But before we even go there, let me ask you this, because you said pizzicato, and I think of the cello, and I think I remember hearing some pizzicato. Do you find that do you do a lot of bowed strings in some of your overdubs too? And part of that question goes back to, the classic, well, we've got these big libraries like Native Instruments, Contact, and stuff like that. What do you want to say about combinations of like samples of strings, being able to like do it yourself? Do you want to encourage people to even like, hey, you could probably like, if you can play a note in tune and learn how to do it, you can do some cool stuff?
I'll start with what I do, and that is like I said, like I try and keep it as live recorded as possible. So I'll usually start with something that I can play, knowing that my talents in that regard are extremely limited. So usually it's just a couple pads or a couple melodies and pizzicato stuff. Sure, effects. I can do effects. Grim Dawn is sort of like a borderline horror game, so it's perfect for just like getting screechy and weird overtones. But as soon as it becomes something where, like, okay, I need it to sound like good classical, cinematic music, then I'll go to the samples and I'll start writing there, because I know that that's going to be either I'll work on it to where it's a good enough space where, I'll work on it to where it's a good enough space where I feel confident that it'll ship. But if hopefully there's a budget on the horizon, and I'll start literally orchestrating for an ensemble. So like in the case of Cypher 007, I knew we were going to have a string section and a brass section.
Using the digital tools to compose, but that that's a guide for, or a roadmap for going into the studio with a real string.
I'm effectively orchestrating at that point, yeah.
At iZotope, tone shaping is topping the charts. Meet the Catalyst series. Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia. Plasma's flux saturation technology brings dynamic warmth and depth to your mix. Aurora takes spatial audio to new heights with lush adaptive reverb, while Cascadia adds exciting delays to your mix, retaining clarity through its smart unmasking feature. Get 10% off Plasma, Aurora, Cascadia, or any of the iZotope plugins with the special code ROCK10, and make your mixes rock at iZotope.com.
So I still, like, because I need to ship demos to the the developers to make sure that the cues are approved. I still have to do the work to get it to sound shippable. Right. And I really don't like delivering even sketches that aren't shippable, because you never know what's going to happen. They might be like, all right, your budget's gone, and then you'll have no music. That is like a nightmare scenario, and it hasn't happened yet. But I always think about that as a possibility. So yeah, so to answer your question, like, I do think that assuming that you can play everything and have it be shippable Hollywood quality is like, that's a bit of a stretch. And also there's sort of a limit to just how much you can actually functionally do by yourself. Right. Unless you're someone like Eli Bishop or Avery Bright. These are local string players that I'll right on. I'll contract out every once in a while for live strings. Caitlin Rates, who they can completely, layer in 15 strings. Well, actually, that's actually a lot of what we did. What game was it? Actually, I think it was Signs of the Sojourner. We had John Estes and his wife, Liz Estes, do a bunch of strings, and they were layering, and we got a lot of mileage that way. But I prefer the full live section, if at all possible. But if I was going to recommend a bank of libraries that folks check out, the Spitfire, everyone knows Spitfire, but people know that for a reason. It's the best sounding stuff that is relatively affordable. There are other brands, but those, you can get the BBC library, and like so many products, shows, games, that's like the sound that they're using. And I'm saying that not as a negative. It's like, it's flexible enough and dry. Like, you can really dial in just how dry you need the sound to be in order to use your own process. A lot of these libraries, they're just baked in Room Verb, which is great for like a quick preset compositional tool, but like I prefer working as dry as possible and using my own production mindset.
Yeah, the Spitfire stuff I've messed with sounds really amazing. I think the first one I ever looked at was the Bernard Herrmann.
I have that one. Yeah, it's great.
Like
I love that. I
actually don't know anything about the story behind it, but I was just like, I was like, what did they do? Did they just like steal these out of old movies or something?
Oh, right,
yeah. Cool quality to it. Now those string libraries all are contact instruments, is that right? Or
they used to be. The Bernard Herrmann one, I think maybe still is, but they built their own plugin since then in the last couple of years, and it's really great. It's not like some of these other companies where you want to stay away. No, their plugins rock solid.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is Native Instruments, do they make some of the sounds and instruments that you use? That's just one that
we go to Native Instrument stuff all day, all night. You know, we're always on the latest complete.
Okay.
And those, I mean, so.
And do you use some of the controllers to go with it sometimes?
Let me think. I don't have any of their controllers.
Okay.
No, I've looked at
just
them in the
MIDI keyboard.
Yeah, what's the
it's
MIDI
the complete
keyboard.
control. Yeah, that
looks amazing.
Series or whatever, and then the machine series.
Yeah.
Well, actually, this one right here, those little mic.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
micro. They'll like sort of
those are world
interact
class.
with them
I mean,
real well.
Yeah. But no, my MIDI setup is very bespoke. Because I'm trying to do a lot with like various controllers.
Right. You can't have the dedicated controller for every single plugin you're going to use. You just sort of have your MIDI controller, and it's got to talk to everything.
I have like a max patch that's always live and running on my machine that's like pointing in different directions. So,
is Ableton Live one of the tools you use a bunch too?
I used it a bunch for the AI project a few years back. So for generative music and loop-based music, it's still my go-to. And in fact, it's because of how much I love Ableton for those kinds of sounds, for that kind of production workflow. It's prevented me from getting any hardware.
When you say generative, what does that mean?
So as opposed to a purely written composition or song that's done in a Pro Tools or Logic that's going to play the same way every time, there may be elements of that song that are either randomized or generated by AI. There could be computer logic that's deterministic. For in a game engine situation, you might have elements of the gameplay or of your decision making or just like what happens, like your health or your power, whatever, that's affecting the music, and then that is inherently generative. So it can mean lots of things for lots of different use cases, but that's the simplest way I think about it is like it's either a pre-written thing that's going to play the same way every time, like a TV show isn't going to change,
pop song, like
or a pop song
on the radio,
versus a video game which is inherently generative. It's changing every time you're going in there, so the song will change.
And why would you want it to do something like that? What's inherent about a video game that makes you want it to be different every time you go in?
It sort of points to the medium, right? Like in a TV show, it's not like every single time you watch it, it's going to be a different soundtrack. That would be cool. I think maybe they did that on Netflix, but for a game, every time you play, sure. I mean, like there are examples of linear music in games like Mario and Zelda, right? Like, and those are some of the
songs
famous,
like that,
yeah. But in some more modern applications, I'm thinking of like No Man's Sky, which is a purely generative game. You might be curious about, well, what if the music matched that style of gameplay or that style of environment presentation? So it's an opportunity. You have to look at it like an opportunity for trying to do something creative with your music. I hate to give people the impression that all game audio has to be generative or has to have these complex systems, because that's not for everybody. It's not for every product. But
is it partly because when you're in a game, there's no telling what the time length of any moment is? You might be on this page or scene or I don't know the right terms to use in the game, but you might be in this room for a short time or a long time, so therefore you don't know what the music's supposed to be, and that's why the generative stuff keeps it going or something like that.
So there's one like space in between linear and generative, and that's like interactive or adaptive music. So
right.
in an interactive and adaptive system, it is tracking your player location, events that like maybe a boss fight going from, sequence A to B to C,
Right.
like as the boss gets,
Does this interview feel like a
angrier.
boss fight to you?
I'm in an interactive music system right now, Lij.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So in those,
So like what you just looked at the treasure chest in the corner, so then therefore the
Right.
music does something different.
so that can be made up of a mixture of linear compositions and generative systems for sure. There's no reason they can't mix and match, but like that's sort of what holds all this together. So when your character is going from inside the house to outside the house in combat, there's a system that's running that's saying, oh, okay, change that music, go from the ambient music, sweet town theme or home theme to a combat piece of music.
Right.
So then it's up to you, the composer, to determine whether or not your combat music needs to be inherently generative. Like, do you want to write a custom piece of music for every single combat type?
Well, you don't know. You don't want them to know what kind of punches you're going to throw, right? Or else you'll lose.
For
the
sure.
combat.
No, and honestly, that kind of sequence can have an effect on music in a lot of cases. In a lot of real world cases, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get to decide like just how many, guitar parts or orchestra parts or drum, different types of taiko drums do you want to have the system randomized?
And
or
I think
choose
about
between?
like in Native Instruments Complete, there's all these like kind of ready to go like
the action strikes I use all day and night,
all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
those plugins that give you these like
it's my guilty pleasure.
Like it would take you a minute to try and build that yourself in the studio.
Oh my gosh,
You're pulling your hair out maybe, but it's kind of nice to just pull it up and you've got like sounds like there's a whole drum core.
I think that is one of my most used. I mean, like game music needs a lot of big drums to get you feeling pumped up. Action Strikes is so great.
What are some ways that you pull out prepackaged, ready-made sounds like that, but then don't also feel like it just sounds like the last one I did or something? Like how do you mix and match? How do you keep it feeling creative?
Yeah, I try, again, similar to how I try not to start with an orchestra sample when I'm writing for strings. I try not to start with a prepackaged taiko drum. So much game music and film music is done that way.
Yeah.
So I have my drum kit. Sometimes I'll just play on my floor tom. I'll like play in a part.
Right. So it's almost like that becomes your played in part becomes the feel and roadmap for the addition of the other things.
And the other things end up becoming just support, like a sub bass to give you that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
As opposed to it being the color. So, we fall into this habit as composers of relying on these presets and because they're a go-to place to like get the job done, get something accomplished and shippable, right? To deliver something by the end of the day. So I just prefer to, take my time and, if it takes me an extra week to get a cue done, it's worth it because the thing that they're getting, that the game is getting is something that's more identifiable, more unique for that experience. It's more coming from my soul. So, I think you don't have to be in the game space to understand that, right? You can be writing a song for music's sake. You can be a music producer working with an artist and have that same mentality. Like you want to bring originality to that artist and their vision. It's the same thing, I'm working on a video game.
Who's the artist when you're doing video game stuff like that? It's like a director or somebody there must be somebody that you're having a conversation with.
Yeah.
In the game world that feels like that, that eye-to-eye contact.
That's
of
right.
working with an artist where you're like, that sounds cool.
Yeah, 100%. It's typically they're different labels for that person, right? But the creative designer or the creative lead.
Yeah.
And every once in a while I'm usually one-on-oneing with an audio director, but more and more I'm actually going right directly to talking to the creative director as creative lead. And they're the one sort of overseeing the vision. It's almost like, at a film, it's the director.
Right.
So they're the one overseeing the vision of the entire game, and music is such a critical part to them, that us having regular check-ins and the approval process is very direct with that person. So, and also what typically happens is when you roll onto a project, you want to get the main theme ironed out. You want to get the main menu music ironed out. You want to have the core motifs and the core instrumentation orchestration ironed out on the early side, so that whenever you hit production, you can just go and require less approvals on the regular. So what usually happens is once we actually hit production, the one-on-ones become less and less, because they're all of a sudden more concerned with game design or level design, finding the fun, marketing. There's other stuff.
I love
that
all
they
these
have.
words. They're throwing out all these game terms. I'm just like writing them all down. Get the menu music ironed out.
Yeah.
Oh, get the main menu.
The main theme.
Main theme music, man.
The main theme is everything.
Yeah. So like one of your albums, it's got actually I wasn't sure what the title is, but the song titles caught my name. So there's Moonbreaker, maybe that was it. So
sure.
Moonbreaker is for a game called Moonbreaker, right? And then there's songs like Be Safe Out There, Booster Shot, Cinder, Final Victory, Ye Aweti.
I know what all these things are.
So those are all like how what do those mean? Those titles, and are there titles that like some of the words I've heard you use that sort of apply to game music in general, and then there are some that are just that's just because of that one game.
Most of the terms I'm just throwing out there are that's game development. Yeah, it's like
talked about like home theme and like combat music and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean if you work in games, like these are the like especially like when you're rolling onto a project, it's some matrix of these. Yeah. Like, am I working with a producer? Am I working with an art director to find, are they going to deliver me concept art so I have an understanding of the environment, and how much is that going to affect, and
how many people might be involved in the creation of a game?
It could be anywhere from, if it's an indie game, it could be 4 or 5 people. And then if it's a AAA game, it could be hundreds, if not thousands of people. The largest team I've worked with is maybe 500
What does
people.
AAA stand for?
Do you know? I don't know. That's
like
a great question. Yeah, it's like, I think when you say AAA, what you mean is like big budget, high, like, effectively Hollywood, like, your multi, $100, $200 million, maybe more, like could be $500 million project. Yeah. So
those games are really big budgets, big money.
Oh yeah. Like Fortnite is just, I don't even know. Like it's ongoing development. So at this point, I have no idea how much they've invested.
Yeah, and I only know a lot of these games. I only know because my daughter, would be interested in playing. My kid would play them. But Fortnite was one of them too. And I'm like, what is it? What do you do? You're parachuting in on an island.
I have no idea what you do in Fortnite
or something when you get there. But like Fortnite, the festival, right? That's the
one that we're working on.
So what is that? Like I saw that and I'm like, oh, this looks kind of fun. Is this like
Fortnite Festival's
like
great.
You go make music? It's sort of a dance, a dance game / band / Guitar Hero kind of thing or something.
It is all of that. You got it. I wouldn't say it's a dance game, but it is.
I just assumed there were people dancing.
They are. They're definitely dancing. But I don't think it is even really a game in that mode. The one aspect of it that is definitely a game is the Rock Band mode, where because the studio that we're working with is Harmonix. It's my alma mater, if you will. They got bought by Epic a number of years back and folded most of that tech into not just Fortnite, but the Unreal Engine. So
I see the Unreal Engine, videos coming up on YouTube, and I'm like, God, that's insane. It looks so amazing.
It's gotten more amazing too. Like in this last year, so much incredible music and audio tech has gotten folded in. If there are any Max MSP people in the audience, like the Metasound world is just your oyster. It's incredible.
When you say Max MSP, I don't really know what that is, but I know that Ableton has a Max for Live thing. Is that the same kind of Max?
Yes, that's different? So the Ableton, I believe, bought. I'm forgetting the name of Max MSP. The developers, Max MSP.
It's not Cycle 74.
It is. That's it. Yep.
Look at me. I'm pulling names out like just out of nowhere.
Yeah. They bought them, I don't even know how long ago, but you can still, and I use Max MSP on the regular as a standalone, but then Max for Live is a part of Ableton. That's right. So that methodology, pure data methodology of like coding for music is what is the basically the conceit of Metasounds, which is in Unreal. So it is, yeah, I mean, I think Max MSP and Metasounds are compatible at this point. I think that there's like a shared knowledge base there. There's like a plugin that you can take your Max patches and have them, be converted into Metasounds now. So you can do some pretty incredible generative, types of workflows and creative applications within Unreal alone, without any, DAW or anything.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus, Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. For those who don't know, Rockstars, Unreal, I think, it's like a 3D modeling software that would let you make characters and objects and stuff for game space, but it also creates like whole worlds of foliage and a whole entire forest that you can wander through, right? And that sort of thing. But then you're saying now they've leveled up the ability to create all the music within that too. So it's basically just like a world creation environment. Yeah,
a 3D world or 2D, whatever, interactive environment creator. Yeah, I mean, I haven't tried to define. I always just think of it as it's a game engine,
right?
Okay. But like, defining that beyond, for a non-game audience. Yeah, you do art, your code, your audio now. Everything that makes up a game, you bring into a game engine,
right? And then when in game engine also sort of implies that when you play the game itself is using that same software to run that engine. It's almost like if we were making music for Pro Tools sessions, and then when somebody listened to it, they opened it up in a Pro Tools session to listen to the music, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the software that is getting shipped. You're actually playing that game. I mean, it gets reduced to what's called a build. So it's not every single line of code that's
kind of like an Atmos mix. Gets delivered as a
folded
file.
down. Yeah. So it does compile, and it is more optimal, and it'll play like relatively performant on whatever hardware you're on. But in a lot of ways, it's still you're especially in an audio world. It's multi-track, it's panning, it's spatializing.
Yeah.
There's a real-time mix happening on the fly. It's actually pretty. I don't know how people give it like the credit. It's working in game audio is one of the most intensive audio careers. Yeah, because you really do have to think about not just that in the software, but also the listening environment of the plug. Are they going to be listening on TV speakers or 714 Atmos?
Right.
It's all. It could be all of the above. It could be like the user can choose what their output is, and so preparing for that, preparing content, mixing, optimizing. You have to think about performance. It's intense.
Well, when you talk about the intensity too, I think I imagine. In record making, there's an intensity to the studio. Sometimes there's an intensity to like the deadline, and then
process.
Later you're like, what was that deadline? It didn't feel real in hindsight or something. And you hear the expression like, it's 5:00 somewhere. It's always cocktail hour. You hear that expression, right? I imagine in game audio, it's like, you're trying to go to bed and you're like, hey, somebody's playing that game somewhere right now.
Oh my gosh.
And you need to be delivering something and working on it.
We have a channel.
What's the schedule like for what you do?
Yeah, so it depends on the game, but just to respond to that real quick, in the Fortnite world, there's that is maybe our biggest audience out of any game that we've worked on, and when they find a bug on something that we've delivered, oh my gosh, we have to fix that as soon as possible.
And they is like the
player.
bazillion users, the bazillion players.
Well, it can be a bazillion, and it usually is just one really vocal user.
Wow.
Yeah.
That has a really popular TikTok.
They're a streamer.
Channel,
yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh gosh, we got to make sure that and I'm not going to say any, I'm not going to point out any of our misfortunes, but.
You've never had any, never had any. We'll ask you the misfortune, or you can even answer it now if you want in the generic contents. Like, have you ever had a studio fail or something that became a real great learning experience for you? That comes.
Thankfully, no. For my company, Skew Sound, we have not. We almost did. Yeah. We almost had a client that ended up becoming, or they were kind of again, I don't want to say names, but they were, let's just say bullies. That they were leaning
the boss.
into.
You were playing the boss. I'm just kidding.
Oh gosh,
I always joke around, but we're talking about real things. So
no, they were just like misogynistic and that kind of thing. Just like their political / social, the way that they presented themselves was like, oh, we do not want to be aligned with these people, and so it could have been a pretty big contract for us, but. We were just like, I'm sorry, like we can't, like you did this, you said this, and it's public, and we can't be a part of that.
Interesting. Well, I think it's important for us to all sort of align ourselves, however we feel we need to work and all that kind of stuff.
It's not easy,
and everybody's got different situations too.
The game world, maybe 5-6-ish years ago. Remember Gamergate? It was right around that. Maybe wasn't in your. No.
I mean, trust me. Like, I mean, I'd be like, you. If you say like, remember the Atari 2600? I'll be like, yeah, totally, man. Superman.
Those were the days.
Superman.
I was like, those are
Yar's Revenge.
Oh man, you're dropping some deep cuts.
That's my. I mean, for me, gaming started when my dad brought home for Christmas. We opened up a Christmas gift, and it was an original version of Pong, which we plugged into the back of the black and white TV.
Wow.
In the front room.
Man, I can't imagine what that must have been like.
I still had that.
It still holds up.
And then it was like, and then my brother and we'd heard about Atari 2600. And so like we bought a used one from one of his buddies for $50. And it came with like 10 games or something. Yeah. And we were like, oh my God, it's amazing.
Wow, there's color now.
So much fun. So much fun.
No, my first console was the original Nintendo. And that was another, going back to just like, what got me into it. I was a huge Nintendo fan. Ever since I saw my friend next door with his before I got mine, I'm like, and I remember seeing Metroid. Do you remember Metroid?
So Nintendo, that's the kind of the generational divide right there.
Oh, okay,
Once I was done with Atari 2600, I don't think I started really gaming again until my PlayStation 1 or something like that.
Well, Metroid was it was like a sci-fi. It was almost in the tradition of like Alien, the Ridley Scott film, very dark and ambient and in this case, very exploratory. So you kind of feel like you're alone, but you have to figure out, like, you don't even know where to go. It's like actually the kind of game that really needed a map and didn't come with a map. So it was very lonely feeling, but really fun. And, the music more than anything though, just like really put you in that place. It was dark, but really well written and intricate, and all like, but on this like, everything's a square wave or something, like It's amazing the kind of world building you can do with the simplistic synthesizers that they had,
like the 8-bit kind of. Did you ever mess around with or know people that did the thing where they convert like Ataris and stuff with the joysticks into 8-bit music generators?
Oh yeah, we worked with there's an artist named Chipsel.
Right.
That's her entire not her entire, but that's kind of her brand is chiptune music, but modern and dance.
It's smart to have a brand. It makes it, I learned that. Yeah. I mean, sorry, I'm always jumping in with the thought, but I learned that my mom was an oil painter, an artist, and she had a friend. And I remember her friend getting the impression her friend was successful with her oil painting in New York. And she was in her hot dog phase. She just painted lots of hot oil paintings of hot dogs. And that was the first time I ever realized, I'm like, oh, it's kind of smart to have a thing, a style, something that people can understand for a while,
Oh gosh, I could use some of that. I don't even know what my brand, but that's why I kind of stick with saxophone. I'm like, I think I might If I just stick with jazz saxophone as my brand, then maybe there's something there. I don't know.
You know, I feel like there's ways to stick to your brand and benefit from that, but still do all the stuff you want to do anyway. You just
100%
tie it back. But I don't know.
No, I don't feel locked in at all. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to do both the big orchestra stuff and then the small extends of the Sojourner, which is just like small ensemble game soundtrack. You know?
So, but I didn't mean to steal the wind out of Chipsel's sails there. So
she's amazing.
Tell us more about her.
She should check out her soundtrack for Super Hexagon and more recently Dicey Dungeons. I played saxophone of all things cool. on her chiptune soundtrack for Dicey Dungeons. And we collaborated on a few things that were unfortunately never released. But yeah, she's probably the world's foremost chiptune artist. If you ask me.
When you say never released, are we talking about similar to the way that the music industry sometimes records don't get finished or released?
100%.
Games don't get finished.
Oh my gosh,
really?
Lij.
I don't know anything about that.
Oh, that's been it. I'll just say it happens more often than you think.
Wow.
I've written so much music that will never see the light of day.
And in
projects.
that world, if you write it and then it's like it's work for hire, so it belongs to it belongs outside of you, so you don't get to well, you know, I mean, I had that struggle too. I did the Bonnaroo backstage studio for 15 years, and while it would see the light of day during the festival and get played on the radio, you know, it's over 1,000 recordings of all these artist names that just don't get released. So nobody, I can throw a party here and like spin it on the soundtrack, you know?
Yeah.
But it's a tough one. I mean, what have you seen in that topic, and what encouragement do you have for the rock stars about how to navigate the challenge of working on stuff that goes somewhere versus sometimes it doesn't, and like what's the balance and which part of that is just life and it's okay, don't worry about it?
Because it happens so much, I think going into this, if you're thinking about this as your career, one way or another, if it's game audio or sound or mixing, game music or sound or mixing, like remembering that it's about the people and it's about the art, the art of making art and the craft of making art and making, like always, I mean, if you don't believe in the project, then hopefully you're in a position where you can say no to it. But if you do believe in the project, it exists from the time that you get started, whether or not it ships. So that integrity and workmanship and you know, just being a human being with the people that you're collaborating with that's shipping right there in the moment. If you think about it like that, you know, those relationships don't just go away. Yeah, sure. The project never ships. Hopefully it does. Maybe it won't. But those relationships could last for years, decades, you know, your entire life. And some of my more formative soundtrack experiences were on games that had never shipped. Notably one for this, for harmonics. And I probably shouldn't say the code name, but it was for,
I don't even know what that means.
The code
You're
name.
safe with me.
It was for the second Xbox, the Xbox One. And that was I guess that's the third Xbox.
The code name is The Eagle Has Landed.
Ooh, you're not too far off, actually. That's hilarious. Well, the code name was Abby. I can say that. The code name was Abby.
Abby Normal. Sorry, that was
all these inside jokes.
Yeah. So that was Young Frankenstein.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I've only seen that once. I need to see that again.
All right, Lij, be quiet for a minute.
No, it's good.
Let the guests do the talking.
It's your show, man. Yeah. So what was I going to say?
Code names and stuff that weren't released.
Yeah, we worked on that project. It was me and 3 other harmonics folks on the audio team, and a team of maybe 50 or 60 people. And it was a AAA game for was going to be a release title for the Xbox One. And it was, you know, it was an adventure game, and it needed a huge soundtrack. And, you know, it was the first time we ever used Audio Kinetics Wise. So this is like a long while back. Mm-hmm. Wise is probably the preeminent audio middleware that ships with most AAA games nowadays. So we'll talk about that later if you want to. But anyway, like through that year of working on this huge game, me and the three other Harmonix folks got really, really close. And when that game got canceled, we were heartbroken for the game, but then we were more so heartbroken about maybe we're not going to get to work together.
Right.
So as a response to that, we started SKU Sound.
Oh, cool.
So SKU Sound came out of that failed project.
Yeah.
So can you call that a failure? You know what I mean?
It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. So that's the mentality, if you ask me. That like.
Yeah, I remember sort of discovering that there would be projects that sometimes I'd work on records with people that I really enjoyed being around, but the music wasn't something I was going to get super excited about afterwards. Sometimes I did records also the opposite, where it was like I was sort of excited about the music, but it was really difficult to work with people too. So it's a weird mix of different stuff that comes along. And I guess
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Sometimes, in the end, it's like, hopefully there's like a great learning experience or some other takeaway. I mean, to work really hard on stuff with people where maybe it doesn't work out or it even is mildly toxic sometimes, but maybe you really leveled up your skill set.
Right.
Sometimes that's your takeaway.
The learnings,
or it didn't get released or whatever.
There's also like a sadness when like something you work really hard on gets released and then it's not as successful, doesn't have the audience that you think it's going to have, So yeah, to like not count on that. I mean, being an audio person in the game industry, yes, of course, we feel the repercussions of failed projects or canceled projects, but less so than like the investors or the heads of studio, you know what I mean? So we can kind of go from one project to the next, kind of being relatively agnostic or detached somewhat from the studios at large. SKU Sound is an independent, we're independent, we're a contract studio. As especially the composers in the industry, almost all of us are independent. We're not tied to. Now I do have a gig with Probably Monsters as their music person, but that's an anomaly, I think.
Yeah.
So, not feeling the brunt of that. So, I mean, we can be more in tune with that reality of being more holistic about the approach of going from one project to the next and the learnings, feeding that back into a life experience. So just to, not be cynical about it whenever these projects, working with difficult teams or knowing that this project is doomed. We're in this situation right now where some project got canceled, and we're using this kind of time in between to learn the meta sound stuff with Unreal, because a lot of it is new. So we're seeing this season as an opportunity. We still have a lot of other projects that are happening, but in the middle spaces of in between meetings or in between things,
there's always in between in the studio too. Because you come out of one project and you're headed to another, and you're like, now is the time to do that other thing we got to do. For me, it was like scrambling to get the video studio set up for the podcast.
There you go.
You jump into a whole new chapter.
Just stay off of TikTok as much as you can. That's the time sink of all time sinks.
Which one? Soaking up some TikTok posts or like posting stuff?
Soaking up.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, for me, I'll be honest, it's more YouTube.
YouTube.
Hello, YouTubers.
YouTube is my spot.
Yeah. The gear videos on YouTube is a dangerous place.
So to comment on that, I realized for me, when I sit down and relax, if I want to turn on the TV or something like that, I might think, it'd be great to watch a cool movie. But then I just get sick of trying to choose which one so fast. Yeah. I'm like, and I just end up on YouTube.
Dude, that was me the last 3 nights. Exactly. Yeah.
So now you can watch Recording Studio Rockstars.
Yeah. Obviously, Recording Studio Rockstars is a special place.
It's the place to be.
Yes,
it's the place to be.
The exception.
Rock your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your music to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with sound design, Complete 15 has you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea all the way through to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound to the next level. Then polish your mixes off with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11 included in Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. And my guest today is Steve Pardo. Join us here at our new video studio, which we still don't have a name for. What should we call this place?
Oh, man. How about Steve Pardo's?
Yeah, I like it.
Just name it after me.
Hey,
I mean,
we talked
obviously.
about the importance of branding, right?
Yeah, I can help you out with that one. Steve's Place.
Steve's Place. I love it. So you ready to jam?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So, and I had to pick up, like, just for effect, I picked up my pencil and put it back down. It's like
Classic.
a Dave Letterman move. Or
Yeah,
something.
Jon Stewart. Yeah,
Jon Stewart.
Exactly.
You have Atmos.
I do.
714.
That's right.
What the heck? How's that for a question? What the heck?
Yeah, no, it's a reasonable question.
I didn't even know. Let me see. While you're answering that, let me see if I can pull up a screen
Sure.
share of a shot of your studio, and you know what inspired you to do an Atmos kind of room. I think this is maybe it right here. Let's see if you can see this, Rockstars.
Yeah.
So really cool looking space. And of course it helps, wide angle camera lenses, fisheye lenses are really great for taking pictures of
I know.
small studio spaces, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it got all the speakers in there. I think it missed one.
Oh yeah, I see speakers on the ceiling.
But
what brand are those? Are those
so the fronts are ATC STM25, the new ones. And then I have one random Dyna Audio for my center channel, BM6, and then the smaller, all the surrounds and the ceilings are Genelec. I think they're 8020s.
Let me see if I feel
It might
like
be
I
8010s.
tried zooming in the other day and it kind of worked. No, I don't think it's going to work.
I want to say they're 8020s. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So 714 is 3 up front,
3 up front,
2 in the back.
Yeah.
One
So
sub and 4 on the ceiling. Is that how it goes?
So
no,
it's
two sides.
It's a 7-1 array like you normally would have it, and then four height channels, four in the ceiling. Yeah. So the excuse I gave myself was we're shipping games that need to have Atmos as part of their surround specification.
Yeah.
That's a modern. I wouldn't say it's a requirement, but a lot of AAA games are going that way. And we have a suite of games that we're working on that are going to need a Atmos mix. I got really into spatial audio with VR, notably with Rock Band VR and Dance Central for Oculus, which is now Meta. And I was working with Ambisonics and working with the binaural stuff, HRTF, algorithms.
So did you start out in just a pair of headphones messing with the binaural?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what do you want to say to us that are curious about this stuff? But then we look at that and we're like, well, how am I going to even do that? Like, how do we get started to start getting our feet wet and figure out what this stuff is before we decide I'm going for it?
Yeah. The headphone, as a starting place, like, Logic has their built-in codec, and I think Atmos has that built into their plugin as well. Dolby has that built into their renderer. You don't need an array of speakers to do a pass, at least a first pass, a quality first pass of an Atmos mix, especially for working in games.
Right.
Because the only application really that, outside of like a true Atmos 714 array that, I mean, I don't know, I've met anyone that has that in their house. I've met folks that have like, the Sonos version of that.
Yeah.
Which is, that those sound great too. I don't mean to knock that.
Can you explain what is the Sonos version of that?
Yeah, they have, I can't remember the name of the bar. I want to say it's the Ray.
So that's the big sound bar that just goes
front.
up
Yeah.
underneath the TV right in front of you, but it sort of has speakers in it to kind of throw the sound around different parts of the room.
Exactly.
And do you think it does it do like psychoacoustic phasing tricks to like make things sound more 3D to you or something?
I'm not an expert on that, but it's definitely not what it's like to listen to music in like Blackbird Atmos mixes in Blackbird.
Right.
It's
where they actually set up the actual speakers, high-end speakers
exactly
in every direction.
And even in my space, like I feel like in my studio, I'm living in a, just I'm in heaven hearing any Atmos mix. I'm just like, this is the best listening experience I've ever had,
And how big is your studio space again?
It meets the most minimum requirement for Dolby specifications. It's 15 by 15 by 10. So it's enough. Right. It's enough. It's like right there. And now the only catch is that I have angled ceilings, and that kind of throws it off. So it's not exactly to spec, and I'm not asking for it to be up to spec either, So
there's so many guests I've had on the show that are in unusual spaces. Matt Boudreau, Brad Wood, both of them have rooms that seem at first glance like, oh, well, how's that going to work? But then they totally make it work.
Yeah, I have a Grace M908, and it does a great job of like setting the delays and getting it as good as you can to at least have it be where all the sound is hitting your ears at the right time. And I don't like using EQ room fixing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I find that it just adds weird artifacts. And I have a decent enough decent enough speakers and a controlled enough room to where I'm like, you know what, just let the sound come out of the speakers. And my 9 to 5 is not mixing and mastering. So right. Like I usually have one extra set of ears after I'm finished with the song, most of the time, not all the time. But
there's also part of me that wants to ask the question of whether or not, as musicians, when we're the artists and we're composing, if we have a different response to what comes out of the speaker than if we're in a mixing situation. In other words, like, I wonder if we're more attentive to an artifact in a sound when we're creating a sound versus when we're taking something that's already been created and we're just doing like final sculpting on it.
Yeah, I as a composer first, I've optimized my space and even the speaker array to fit that. Like I probably should have gotten bigger surround speakers, or cared more about their specific placement. I'm like, this is good. This is past the 80% threshold at the very least. Like I'm good.
Well, another thing that you probably are faced with as a composer with the instruments in the space, behind you is acoustic instruments. Well, acoustic instruments resonate.
They resonate,
too.
Yeah.
So then, you're not necessarily going to crank it up to like ear-splitting volume and, be like, nothing makes any sound in the room.
When I really need to mix, I will put dampening stuff on all my,
right.
But even then, stuff is ringing out.
You just put sponges in all the guitar strings or
they
something.
They make a fancy little like wrap that you can put on your acoustic guitar strings.
Nice.
It's like Velcro in the back, and it's almost like a.
Is it like one of those lavender eye pillows? Except you just like wrap it. You just gently.
Actually, yes.
The guitar.
That is kind of what it's like. And then I just put stuff over but honestly, I'm more in the creative composing process than anything else.
Yeah.
So now, I do find myself mixing games often,
right.
But it's a different beast, I think that, to do 90% of the job of mixing a game in a home studio is perfectly acceptable. And then to go to a legitimate, like a Blackbird kind of place, or Lucasfilm
or something?
What's escaping me? The ranch, what's it called?
Oh,
Skywalker Ranch.
Skywalker Ranch, yeah.
To finish a product, I think.
Have you had a chance to do that? Have you done it?
Hopefully.
What about Blackbird? That's part of your process.
That's on my to-do list.
And where would you ask? Would you say, hey, by the way, can I do it in the Massenburg room?
Oh, we have to do it there. Yeah. No, so sorry, I mentioned the canceled projects that's all of my Atmos projects have been canceled so far. So, but it's okay. We got one on the horizon, so it's all good.
Well, I mean, that is my guess is that accompanies a high budget, high risk, and when you play in that sandbox, an independent artist, the risk is that, like me finishing my record, that I just don't get around to it or something like that.
Sure.
But like, in a high budget one, it's like there's a bean counter somewhere.
Yeah. I think what's nice is that audio is typically relatively inexpensive compared to some of the other disciplines out there. You can get away with a great sounding audio soundscape with 3 or 4 people,
Yeah.
So you can put your budget, like, if you want to have a higher budget, you can put that into live orchestra. You can put that into mastering at Blackbird, and it's a drop in the bucket for, any of these AAA games.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm now budgeting that into a lower budget game, which still has a high enough budget to where these costs don't matter that much to them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and ship with Atmos.
It's pretty exciting. It's a real shift in mindset too, to take yourself out of the kind of starving artist mentality that survives an independent music career or something, and step into another world that has a different kind of operating budget, and be able to take advantage of those things.
That's right.
They might be, those advantages might be ready and waiting for you. All you got to do is just say, hey, if we do this thing, it could sound amazing.
Now, the trick is when the budget start getting, or when the risk starts meeting reality, and the investors or whoever is in charge of the money start to be like, oh, we need to make this budget go down. The first thing that gets cut is the Atmos mix, or the live orchestra.
Not the marketing.
Oh gosh. Marketing sells games, so all the respect to the marketing teams out there. Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep talking about the Atmos thing for a sec. So you set up a whole thing, you got it sounding good.
Yeah.
Now, how do you use it? So, for example, are you composing where you're putting a sound in a particular location in space during the creation of the sound, or is it something that gets saved for after you've recorded stuff, then you sort of place it into a mix or something? How does that work?
Yeah, it's really quite fun in the game world. So I still compose and do everything in stereo. That's just my happy space. But as soon as it's ready for the game, you can choose how you want, because they're games are a real-time rendering piece of software. So you don't need to do an Atmos mix in a DAW. You can do your Atmos mix in the game engine. So so if it's like a menu mix or something that I know that it can be relatively static, then I will move over to an Atmos specific session, in Logic. I use Logic.
So Rockstars, Lij jumping in for clarity, hopefully. A menu mix, I assume, means when you're on the menu page of a game and nothing's happening, you're just choosing your character or where you want to start, or you're saving something.
Yes, exactly.
Versus a dynamic part of a game where your whole perspective is shifting as you move around in a space.
Your character, your camera, everything's rotating, moving, around an interactive space.
Not bad for a guy who stopped playing games at Atari 2600, right?
Yeah, you crushed it. So if I'm working on something that I know is just linear and it's just going to be played back on speakers and nothing's moving around, then I still will prefer to deliver a complete Atmos mix. But if it's a dynamic space, then all of a sudden you might want things coming in and out of the height channels. You might want the flutes only to come in when you're, out in the forest, right?
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music. Like the new iZotope Plasma plugin, featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks and mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, or reference a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity and impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma Ozone RX or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Now, do the flutes stay in one location so that if you turn your head, the flutes
100%.
stay there?
Yeah,
and that works well in games.
Yeah.
Have you had any personal feelings about how that applies to listening to music as a record listening experience versus
I have
hearing
feelings.
it in a game? Yeah, tell us what your thoughts are.
I mean, I'm not listening to those mixes. I'm listening to the stereo mixes on headphones.
Right.
Yeah, because the artifacts of whatever codec is going on, as good as they've gotten, and I've seen them go, from generation 1 in the Oculus days to how they are now with Apple and I have a Vision Pro, and I'm checking out those mixes in there as well. The artifacts, they really bum me out every single time. Maybe if you see, I have the luxury of listening to them on a real Atmos space, and so that's what I'm comparing it against. So if I didn't have that like real world Atmos speaker array experience, then I'd be like, whoa, like I'm listening to Eleanor Rigby and all the strings are panned around me and this is crazy, So yeah, if you don't have that experience or that access to like a real world speaker array, then I'm sure that's, a worthwhile treat, to experience music that way. But that an artifactless listening, I still think is unparalleled, to no codec, nothing's in between the music as it was mastered and how it's appearing, left and right or through my speakers.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, there's still something, there's still sort of like this wonderful gold standard of like a really great stereo setup, and you're just dropping the needle on a great vinyl record playback, first, straight to disc pressing of something. Man, it's a pretty amazing experience.
We got a new car. I know this is off topic, but we got a new RAV4, and like we were longing. It's been a while since we've gotten a new car, and we're missing the CD player.
Oh yeah.
And so we bought a cheap, whatever random CD player off Amazon that you could plug in with the USB. I can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Even in a car, like
it's just playing a WAV file.
It's just playing a web, but it's something about that. I don't know. Maybe
because otherwise, you're sort of streaming from your phone to the car.
Bluetooth. Yeah.
Over Bluetooth. Yeah. So now my car is the Tesla Model 3, and I was struck by how much better the streaming sounds to the car stereo in that versus what I had before. So I think there are like some cars maybe have like high quality codecs for the streaming, but I mean, like, who's to say?
Yeah, or just really good speakers.
Are you gonna like go find out in some Reddit post somewhere?
I'm genuinely curious about this. Just like, what is it about some cars and some Bluetooth codecs that seriously do reduce the quality even of a WAV file? Like it's something's getting lost. Yeah.
Also, how would you listen back to something in the car if you were going from phone to car?
That's exactly.
But I mean, what app would you be listening on?
Oh, well, see, again, like, because I truly believe that codecs ruin like Bluetooth ruins everything, I'm just like, whatever, Spotify.
Right.
Yeah.
I think part of it sometimes is deep diving into the settings. I think sometimes we can, if we just go and we really carefully do the settings in our phone, we might discover that, I wasn't even listening in the high res mode.
Right.
I needed to turn this on or enable this. I know for me, initially trying to understand like what's the Atmos sound versus the stereo sound. And I was blowing it in headphones because I didn't understand things like making sure sound check was on in the music app.
That's a huge one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then forcing it to go from stereo to Atmos so I knew what I was hearing and stuff like that. Once I did, I've heard mixes where I'm like, oh wow, the Atmos mix like really expands in the headphones. But like you, I don't like turning my head and having it try and make the music sound like it stayed in place, because to me, I do hear artifacts in that still.
Yeah, and every once in a while you'd be like in a good spot and you're like, oh, it's good right there, and then you move just a little bit and you hear the phasing, you know.
It's funny, and I wonder if that experience is common for music consumers as it is for music creators. Because I think as creators, we hear that and we're like, what's going on to the music?
Yeah.
But maybe for a consumer, maybe it's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah. I honestly wonder if any consumer even knows that they're listening to spatial music most of the time.
Most people don't. Most people, when I ask people who aren't in music about Atmos, they don't know what it is.
Yeah. It's the first thing I do when I get a new Apple product is like turn off the spatial audio, you know. But I mean, I don't know. I want to circle back, like the VR/MR/Apple Vision Pro. That use case is legit.
Yeah. Have you messed with the Apple Vision Pro yourself?
Yeah. I love
do you
it.
have to own one for all of the stuff you're doing?
I'm working on 2 games. One of them already shipped-ish, the DOS game. Shipped on, there's a version that works on Apple Vision Pro. And then there's another game that is a saxophone virtual reality simulator that I'm working on with my brother. That sounds
like right up your alley.
It is 100%. It's literally my brand. It was the impetus for me and my brother starting our studio, the Pardo brothers. That idea. And so it's actually in development.
That's the name of your studio, is the Pardo
That's
brothers?
the game development studio that we have. It's, you know, we're just me and him, and we're just working. It's just the nights and weekends hobby thing to do. But it's
because too bad of your brothers, because if you weren't brothers, it could have been the Pardo Pals, you know, maybe, or something like that.
We could still be the Pardo Pals.
You could be the Pardo family with a PH.
Pardo family.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. These are ideas.
Yeah, this is why I don't have a name for my studio yet. All right, cool. So let's see. So that was cool to hear, though, because it helps us understand a little bit about, you know, when you're composing, you pretty quickly said, you know, you'll stay on stereo to make the music, and then you'll move over to the Atmos. So I haven't. I'm curious about the time when people start composing in the Atmos setting while they're composing, and what that even means at this point. Like, would you turn around and play your guitar to the speaker that it's going into that's behind you, or would you?
I've heard different like thought process behind that, you know, or method. Like there's a big Atmos conversation out there, right? And approaching songwriting or music production with Atmos in mind is one of them. Yeah. Like that being how you start writing a song. And I don't know, for my purposes, I think maybe if I liked the Apple binaural rendering thing more, then maybe it'd be incentivized for that. But I just feel like the audience isn't there, or I just don't think it's a valuable enough proposition to like optimize for that output.
Right.
So I because I work in games, I do think about that output often when I'm composing. Mm-hmm. Like I'm like, okay, well, if the camera's here and the player's there and they're going to do this and this might happen, you know, enemies are going to throw magic on them and maybe they'll be underwater. Okay, that would be really cool to have these elements in the song, in the composition, in the mix. I'm still going to prioritize that in the stereo mix. I'm still going to make sure that is the Cadillac version, you know, because not everyone is going to be listening. It's all about that. Like most people are going to be listening through TV speakers.
Yeah.
So prioritize that first, even when I'm composing. And then I can stem out and be like, how am I going to make this, you know, the like for the 20 people out there, and including myself, that have an Atmos array, give them that luxury experience.
Yeah.
You know, and it still sounds great. Like I'm not one of these Atmos highfalutin Atmos, I don't know what the right word is, but like I'm not super picky about my Atmos mix. I generally love Atmos mixes.
Yeah.
When I hear it, like in my like true no HRTF, no rendering in between, pure Atmos mixes, my favorite way to listen to music. And I'm just not that picky. I love all of it. Like even if it's the Bill Frisell had a record come out. He's one of my favorite jazz guitar players. Not too long ago, when it's just him and a quartet, like a jazz quartet, and they're mostly in the front, and the Atmos mix is generally just reverb. Like it's just they just made it feel like you were in a space.
Yeah,
and I loved it.
Yeah,
I just love the the playground of Atmos mixes and what people are doing out there. I'm just not that picky.
Right.
So that feeds back into my mentality of composing for Atmos. I'm just like, you know what? Like the people that have this are going to get to experience the spatial nature of some of the arrangement ideas that I have. And the ones that don't aren't really missing that much.
Yeah.
That they're still getting a great mix, and it reflects the characters of the game. It does storytelling. It is responding to gameplay. That's the priority. So anyway, that's just my mindset.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's good to hear you point out for the people who do have it, they can still enjoy the deluxe experience. Like that always exists with stuff we do. I mean, if music making was a hotel, it can be smart to have lots of rooms for everybody, but also the deluxe room for those who might want it or something,
It also is a great selling point for marketing, or even to show like a Sony or a Microsoft, hey, we're using your latest and greatest audio tech.
Right.
Like, aren't you proud? And then they might market us more or something.
Yeah. I mean, and as music artists, if we've got a fan base, I've known music artists that do clever things like, giving people an opportunity to come to a special show, but then there's also a VIP level of ticket selling where, you get a face-to-face music experience in the back room before the show with extra snacks and free champagne or something. It's just smart to think like that, even in a studio setting for our studios.
I love that.
What can be our regular thing and what can be our deluxe version?
That's cool. Yeah.
Well, so let's see. Some other questions I wanted to ask you about your space, which is very cozy and everything like that. Do you find that the space you're in can have a big influence on the music that you start making? And so the counter to that question is, if that's the case, what have you learned about, because I'm thinking if you sometimes have to make music that sounds really intimate and sometimes you have to make it sound like, action strikes. Yeah. And so like, what are some ways that we can counter that influence of our space if we're like, it's not right for this song?
I mean, everyone has it's all personal preference, right? And I preferred having a more lively space than a dry one. And most audio spaces, they need to tamper down on reflections for very good reason. But since composing is my primary, that's my mode of creation on a day-to-day, I don't know, I like a little room liveliness coming through the microphone. A little bit more dimension.
Well, that's the interesting thing about what you're referring to. So in a strictly control room environment, you might think, the only instrument here is the speakers trying to reach my ears. But in a composing space or in like a music, a writing room or something, then you might say, hey, the most important thing here is the instrument in this space going to that microphone.
That's right. Yeah. So it's, in a way, it's more of a tracking room, I guess, and even then it's like, it's still a hybrid. So when I moved in there, I knew it was a square room and that was going to be a problem and I would have to address that someday. And that did have impact my, composition and performing. I was just worried all the time that things were going to be, too phasey or coming in wrong. And
how did you, well, one of the ways that I thought of just looking at the picture is by filling it full of instruments, it diffuses the sound out and diffuses the space, changes the nature of the space a little bit.
So over the years, I've been just slowly like figuring that out. Like, what parts of this room can I maybe make a little bit better? And that was one of them. So hanging all the guitars on the back wall is effectively diffusion. It's not like scientific or anything, but it's doing something.
Right. It wouldn't necessarily change the room modes.
No.
Which is where some of the square problems are, but it changes the way the sound bounces around in the space, right? Do you feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for more of a simple and straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all of your struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mixing system from Grammy-winning mix engineer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix in your home studio that will sound great everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. That was absolutely the most helpful and informative block of information and mentoring on the mixing process that I have ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up pro tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, I'm so confident that this will help you take your mixes to the next level, that if you can't get a killer mix in 30 days, I'll give you a refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the ultimate snare mixing trick. And hopefully I'll see you in the front row of the Grammys.
So to fix the room modes, I actually had to, I don't know if you have the picture pulled up.
I'll pull it back up while you're chatting.
But the front and back walls are actually carved out, and they're definitely more in that, you know, I thought about like how good studios would do it, and it's just filled with foam. It's filled with Owens Corning.
Yeah, so
both the front and back.
You've got like clouds, kind of. It looks a little like almost like my room. The cloud above the mixing space.
Cloud above the mixing space, and that's where I do a lot of tracking too.
And then you've got keyboards and off to one side, amps off to the other.
Yeah,
and all the and you got a drum kit in there too.
Yeah,
cool.
Drum
so
kit.
You play drums. And look at you.
Yep.
Is that the Triad Orbit coming down from the ceiling or something to mount?
Is that
them?
what it is? Yeah,
might be.
I don't know what brand it was.
Quite so close, but you've smartly mounted your overhead drum mics on the ceiling, so they come down right above the drums.
Yeah, less mic stands getting in the way of, you know.
And then of course you got the classic mini split HVAC. That's sort of like the.
I mean, it's right above the garage. It gets really hot in there. That's a great mini split. That was a huge quality of life upgrade, getting a dedicated. I mean, because there is central air getting piped through. It just wasn't enough. It was too hot in there. So, but yeah, knocking down those walls and filling them with foam solved a lot of my bass problems. I wouldn't say all of them, but after I did that big overhaul in the room, I was like,
so knocking down the walls. So you actually like punched out the walls, and then they became bass traps where the sound could sort of leave the square space.
You got it.
Into what would be the attic space. Or something
you got
it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a clever way to do it.
Yeah,
right?
so it's effectively more like a 25 by 15 now. So, you know, and I'm still right in the center of the room. It's like a little bit forward, so not your perfectly ideal mixing location, but you know, it's again like I have to weigh my priorities.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I can mix great mixes in there. If I need to deliver a great mix, and if it's not going to see another set of ears, like at this point now, I'm feeling pretty good about.
Now you have a poster on the back wall that you generously brought over, a gift for the studio too. So I wondered if you wanted to show us what that is.
Yeah. So DOS is my latest.
Bring that out and show everybody.
Yeah.
So by the way, that let me see. That'll work. Yeah. That'll work. If you want to hold it up in front of you, you have to cover your eyes, and then the camera will focus on the vinyl. That's great.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's great. Perfect.
Yeah, this is my latest album, DOS, and it is many years in the making. And I worked on it with my bud John Estes, who we've been talking about a few times now. And it's an instrumental jazz, mostly jazz kind of record, you know, but it's definitely more experimental rock influenced, loop based influence. There's some strings. There's it definitely lots of elements of my game music you'll find on this record. It's only 7 tracks, but it's a lot in those 7 tracks. And
we have a link to that in the show notes too, Rockstar, so you can go just play it and listen to it. It's cool.
Yeah. So the shtick, if you want to call it a shtick, is that it's also a game. So you can.
DOS is the game too.
Is a game.
And is it a game that you guys are making, or is it one that you made the sound for?
No, so this is the first game that my studio with my brother released. It was it came out in March.
So
it was just me and my brother.
making the game too now.
That's right. exactly.
Oh, so what is the game? So it looked a little bit like, it reminded me a little bit, I think, when I saw the clips of like blocks moving around like Minecraft kind of vibe or something, right?
Yeah, Minecraft and very Monument Valley-esque, if you will. It's a relatively well-known kind of indie, evocative kind of puzzle game.
And also there's, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's Atari 2600 is coming back to me.
Oh.
There's one, I forgot what the game was, but you're like a dot and you move around through different castle spaces and you rescue.
I don't know if you're thinking of it, but there's this other game called Marble Madness.
No,
it wasn't that.
No, it's probably pre that. I'll see. Maybe it'll come.
There's elements of lots of my favorite games. And as inspiration for this game.
I think it might have been, Superman was a cool one too. Anyway.
Oh, wow. But no, maybe your audience would appreciate this. This is actually a diffuser panel.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So,
and that's what's on the back wall.
That's on the back wall of my studio.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that was the commission. A local artist, Natasha Newman, who lives, here in Nashville. She makes, diffuser art for, for folks. Yeah. For studios.
Did you hear that, Rockstars? So let's write that down. Say it one more time.
Natasha Newman. And it was an idea, it was actually my wife's idea when we were thinking, because I designed this logo in a game engine.
And Newman sounds so close to Neumann.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's selling itself.
Uncanny. So does that mean that if we thought we want to create like a cool logo diffuser for our studio,
there you go.
It might be possible?
That's what she does. That's what she did for me. Yeah.
Wow. All
No,
right,
but her approach to the art side of making a diffuser is amazing. It's really, all of her works are really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the inspiration. And when she made that, I knew I wanted it sort of at an angle like this, more of a isometric view, which is lots of games have that isometric viewpoint, like camera view. And the game was just like appeared in a vision, and I was like, well, I have to make that now.
Oh, that's cool. Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying instead of it looking like a two-dimensional thing that you look straight on at,
like a Mario,
because it has depth to it, you're looking from the side, and like some lettering is larger than others.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very cool. All right, cool. Well, let's see. What else do I want to ask you about? What about the mood? So one of the questions I wrote down was, do you start with a sound and then follow a mood, and then find a mood, or do you start with a goal for something and then find a sound?
Yeah. So if it's a theme, if it's a main thing, like usually when I get put onto a project, the first thing that the designers or the creative lead wants to hear is the main theme. The main theme is sort of like your first track on a record, where it may not be what the sound of the rest of the record is, but it's an important track. It's like it's your intro to the game, to the experience. So that's sort of like a first stab at an instrumentation or a mood, if you will, because so much of the narrative you want to have sort of living in that piece, both in the motif or the main melody that you write, but also just in the nature of the instrumentation and the presentation of the mix. Even like everything is storytelling in that one piece of music. But that's not always doing a lot of heavy lifting from a narrative point of view. So it isn't, that's sort of like, it can just be on a trailer. It can just be like a song. It can be with lyrics. It's its own, usually a standalone piece of music. Once you get into working on the game, whether it be like a piece for a character or an environment or a combat, those are kind of specific, specialized needs that music needs to serve. So I like to sort of characterize that piece not just within the environment that it's taking place in, but the context of the narrative, if it even has a narrative. So like, what is the main character going through? What is their quest, if they have one? How far along are they on that quest? And these are questions I would typically ask the creative lead to just see how much of this should I care about right now.
Right. So you, just for helping us understand context, if we think about Star Wars and we think about themes for different characters,
right?
those themes may reappear throughout the movie in different settings to create different moods, but have the same theme still, melody theme. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? Or is it more of like the theme and the melody itself changes? What part of your main theme carries through these other aspects of the game when you're playing it?
Yeah, usually we would write a motif. When I say we, I mean like composers write a motif or a theme. I mean that theme, melody, motif, they're called interchangeable kind of terms. But I'll call it motif for now. It can be just like 3 or 4 notes, right? It could be 12, 20 notes. Like it, whatever that might mean to you, the composer, is what you would migrate into the story as it goes along. And that could certainly evolve. But those intervals, especially if it's short, are going to be really important that they always stay that way.
Right.
So
they're recognizable.
Yeah. Like the Force theme never changes. The main Star Wars theme never changes. The Empire theme or the
from movie
Darth
to
Vader,
movie and stuff,
yeah, it's the same theme every time. If even it's in the same key and it's presented the same way, we don't need to be that precious about that. It's up to the composer or the game. But for certainly, like if we have the time and it makes sense for the game to have character themes, to have location themes, to have themes, i.e. hope or despair. That's stuff that you can bring back around and get. It makes because composing can be a process. It can be a job. Sometimes when you're especially working on a TV show or a I've done scored podcasts before. You don't have time to like think of new themes every single time something circles back around. So to have a library of themes or sort of palettes ready to go, so that you're just composing, you're just working.
Because whatever's due was due yesterday.
Exactly. Yeah. Honestly, especially with TV, that's I worked on a number of years on a few different TV shows. And that speed, man, all the respect to the TV composers out there, people that work in film, primarily TV. It's such a fast paced thing. Yeah, I mean, deliveries, weekly, bi-weekly, that's not unheard of. That's actually that was the speed we were working at.
Do you find that when you get into that kind of speed, it's collaborating with other people that make things happen well? In other words, like you learn to focus on the simplest version of what you need to deliver immediately and take advantage of other people involved to level it up somehow, or is that not the right way to think about it? Like when I think about, the sole composer in their own home studio doing everything themselves versus the movie shoot where you're like, oh wow, there's 100 people here today getting everything done all at once.
I think I understand your question. It depends, right? If I can get a lot done by myself when I'm just like heads down, turn all notifications off, go, just execute.
Yeah.
But if you're writing 30 minutes of music in a week, that's impossible. Like that's just impossible. That's when a team and that support is required. And if I'm, lead composer on a project, I might still want to do a lot of sketching and like, hey, this is an important story beat. So here's like a quick piano sketch of, where I think the music should go and the flow and the instrumentation, which I might just be communicating over text. Here's the piano sketch, but like, have the top line be on the violins and the flutes, and then, have the taiko drums come in on, measure 30 or something. There's a relative shorthand that you establish with your collaborators in that sense. But, like sometimes like on the Fortnite project, it's not that exactly, but I know the limits of my own compositional skills, right? Or rather like where I excel versus where I can just I can deliver you a product, but that's not my EDM is not my space.
Right.
I shouldn't be delivering.
So have you found like you've collected some people that are great at that you can turn to?
Exactly. Yes. There's this incredible musician named Justin Trout. I'm going to name drop him. because he is one of my favorite young talents. I work with him whenever possible on electronic music. He's very like under the radar. He doesn't like market himself or anything.
Not anymore.
Yeah, he's helping me out with the Fortnite project a ton, and then John Estes as well. He can execute on all acoustic music. He just is, and also he's just like a world-class bass player.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my current collaborators.
What about when it's time to play drums? Do you jump on a drum kit yourself?
Oh gosh, no.
Do you program a lot, or do you just have drummers that come in and?
That's the one instrument where, I mean, I've like on Signs of the Sojourner project, I played a lot of drums because it's very folksy and light.
Right, it's easy to play the part you were thinking of.
I just have so much respect for the drums, and I love the drums with a passion that I have no right to be shipping, production quality music with me on drums. So on the James Bond soundtrack, I had 2 drummers.
For 15 years, I had a famous MCI console at my studio that originally came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made some of the most iconic Grammy-winning records of the 1970s. And it sounded incredible. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to a full digital mixing setup, I teamed up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. The MBSI captures the same iconic sound used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, the movie, all for legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Simzik. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a dual EQ filter switch, adding tools that Bill Simzik said he would have loved to have in the original console. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound at makebelievestudio.com/MBSI.
Second.
And would you have a drummer come to your studio and record in your small space, or would you find it's okay, today we're going to book out
we
a
went
studio
to
with a full drum room?
Yeah, we did it at the Bigwig studio.
Right, which also means you now have to show up ready. You have to know what your arrangement is and your part and stuff like that.
I'll certainly deliver a first pass with me playing drums. I mean, there's a reason I have a drum set in my space, for either sketching or delivering,
give
less
a sketch
intensive.
Of an idea. Right. So that somebody can replace the drums in something.
Yeah, and I still prefer like a live performed sketch than me on programming drums.
Yeah.
Now I do program a lot of drums, hip hop. Like as soon as it becomes electronic, then sure, I can do that.
Yeah.
And then even the more symphonic, like taiko. My favorite. While we're on the topic, my favorite cinematic drum sample right now is the Hammers kit by Spitfire. I like them because they're not so aggressively, they don't have like a huge character. Like Action Strikes are huge.
Right.
They're going to give you that oomph no matter what. Hammers is just like a little bit more, organic. And
what are the Japanese drum ensembles called where they play the big
Japanese?
Sticks? Yeah, I've seen that. I forgot what it's called.
Oh,
where
man.
they're like,
sorry,
when you keep saying taiko drums, it just makes me think of that.
Yeah. No, I should know this.
Anyway, but
Sorry.
that's the Action Strike stuff reminds me of that. It's like, it's a big, like, big drumming, hitting the log drum.
Just has so much force, But anyway, like, I just even if it's for one of the games that got canceled, it had a lot of just regular rock drums, and there was a certain point where it just reached my limits,
right?
And I just needed to hire. I can name drop this guy, Chris Brush. He's a local studio guy here in town who has his own studio. He's also a music producer, excellent human being, and an incredible drummer. And he also plays with me in my jazz quartet, which I do have a jazz quartet.
Right on, man.
But he's primarily a rock guy, studio guy. And he's just gonna make it sound way better than me. Like it's a whole nother instrument at that point. You give that role to an actual drummer. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I've had chance in my studio to have the kit mic'd up, and we switched out, and the drummer came out and played lap steel, and I went and played drums on
Oh my
song.
gosh.
And it's great when you get a chance to do that, because those are situations where literally nothing changes except for the
human
player.
Yeah.
And so you really get a sense of like what the difference is. And
Wow.
it was, we both did great. I was very proud of myself for playing a great part. I picked an easier one to do, you know? But like just the way the drums sounded, just the way the snare sounded when he hit it was like, and this is Will Metters, a buddy of mine from down the street, a great drummer. Just very different. You know, he made it sound like a tough drum set. And I'm like, I sound like, I don't know, I sound different. You know, I sound like
it's humbling,
precious about the drums, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you know, sometimes, at least I like to think that I can play drums. I like if
drums are fun to play.
Oh my gosh. Well, another soundtrack I was working on, there was this chance for it to, like the actual drum sound that they needed was like a high school garage rock band.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is my moment.
Nice.
I can do this. I did need to get a Black Beauty drum Ludwig. So I did make a little bit of an investment to get the sound.
Ooh, I really want to get a Black Beauty. I don't have one yet.
Yeah. It was worth it for sure. Cause it still needed that 90s big punch, but it needed to sound loose and just slightly out of time, like that high school vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could accomplish that.
I enjoy when I get a chance to play drums like that, like indie rock band stuff. But if the tempo goes up and if it's like a punk rock thing, forget about it. Yeah. Well, so let me jump to another question here. This one is a hypothetical question I like to ask all our guests on the show. We can take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time, find young Steve, and say, listen, dude, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could? Maybe you were lounging by the lake on the University of Miami campus watching the palm trees sway.
Yeah. I could go so many directions right now.
Yeah,
but
pick anyone you want.
It's
your advice to yourself. You can say anything you want.
So before I answer the question, I feel like the process that I went through was the process I had to go through.
Yeah.
Like I mean, of course, I wish I would have gotten more into electronic music earlier, because that's a sphere for me that I am lacking in.
You mean like EDM?
Or not even that, but yeah, like any sample-based, groove-based music is something I'm still learning.
In all fairness, you know, you chose Logic and deep dove into that.
Right.
If you, maybe if the timing was slightly different and your first DAW you're presented with was Ableton, it would have been a different experience or something like that.
Yeah, so in a way, it's just my generation, but I knew people that were getting into like Reason and were making beats.
Right, yeah.
And I kind of wish I had, I actually was in a band with Paul Bender, who is the bass player for Hiatus Coyote when I was in school. And I remember him, young Paul Bender, making the fattest beats I've ever heard on his little laptop. And I was like, you are a savant human being. How can anybody do this?
That's awesome.
So I really wish that I had done a little bit of that. But you know, that's just like, there's room for a collective of people in this. Like, we don't all need to know everything, but that's maybe my like kryptonite there, is that I feel the need to, I'm so curious about everything.
Yeah.
That like, I do feel like there's always, I mean, that's just like the life learner aspect of who we are, or who I hope to, that's like my mentality is just like, I'm always in school. I'm always in university. I'm always there's always something to learn or something to get into. And so if there's anything in this space that I wish I had known more, was how awesome tape looping can be.
Oh yeah.
and recording to tape and playing with tape, sound design with tape. I think
Did you get yourself a little tape deck?
I have a little Tascam now, but I feel like.
And have you actually busted out a splicing block? And
I'm
made
not
some
there
tape
yet.
loops yet.
I'm not there yet. But I did have a jam sesh with Jamie Liddell not too long ago.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and
He's been on the show too.
Oh, really? He has?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like all into that, and that opened up my world. Seeing him do, I was playing saxophone and he was recording and looping and doing some fun stuff, and it blew me away. Just totally blew me away. So I feel like that if I had known that,
he toured as a looping guy.
Yeah, for a long time.
For a long time, right?
Yeah, and we actually briefly worked together on a game in the not too distant past.
That's cool.
So we got to work pretty closely together, and to see him, I mean, he's just on another plane of like, you know, have you seen his modular setup?
I don't know if I've seen it. No, I don't think I've seen it recently.
It's incredible, and he knows how to use it. That's the thing that like blows me away, is that he's making amazing music with that thing, and with ease, with relative ease and enjoyment. So,
well, there's something cool about knowing how to use the analog synth stuff, because it does create sounds that just, when you hit it, it feels right.
Yeah.
You know,
if you're
sonically.
And for games especially, that's extremely relevant as a sound design and, you know, creating new atmospheres, imaginary worlds. The thing with me and tape is that like I feel like that actually would reinforce a lot of the stuff that I'm into, like the jazz, experimental, indie kind of, that palette of music production and composition is very much so. So anyway, I'm just now getting into it, but I wish that I had known that when I was 20 years old, for sure.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. It's been a blast hanging out with you again. Not too long ago, you and I got to be on a AI panel of all things at SAE Institute, and it was fun to meet you there and discover all your music. Let the Rockstars know, where can they go find you?
Sure.
Where should they follow you and keep up with you? What if they've got the greatest game ever and they need the just right music design for it?
Yep. So my website's stevepardo.com. My game music / audio studio is SKU Sound, which you could find at skewsound.com. You can
SKEW SKU. Right?
That's right. All one word. Yep. SKEWSOUND. And I'm on Instagram at Steve Pardo. I'm trying out this Blue Sky thing, which a lot of people are jumping on. I don't even know my name on that place.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
It's kind of a long one. But yeah, if you want to find me on Instagram, that's probably the best place.
Awesome. And then, do you have any questions for the Rockstars? I mean, we're in a world of comments now. You know.
Oh my gosh.
What do you want to know?
What game are you playing? That's what I want to know.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then you're also working with people who are just making cool records and
yeah. So I
want creative, the kind of creative stuff that you do.
So most of the time whenever I'm supporting artists here in town, it's on horns. I do a full horn section kind of thing where it's I bring my alto, tenor, Barry, and a trumpet. I do play trumpet. Cool. And I'll just provide a horn section. But I've done lots of, ambient kind of stuff. I have a buddy who lives in New York, Dion Kerr, who I'll do more of like the ambient woodwind stuff with pedals. Because we didn't talk about pedals. Like that's... I know. That really wanted to do that. But well, if you want to say something about pedals, go ahead. You had mentioned a pedal company that you... Chase Bliss. What's like if you're into experimental pedals, you know about Chase Bliss. Is
that like the hologram pedal or something?
No, that's another one though.
Yeah.
What's the name?
Yeah, we'll come I'll Google it on the side.
I know the hologram pedal. For some reason, I'm skipping the name.
What about the Chase Bliss pedals?
They're just putting out a new one every couple months, and they're all just unbelievably incredible. So I most recently.
Oh, is it hologram by Microcosm. Granular looper pedal? Yeah.
Hologram Microcosm. Yeah.
Hologram Electronics. Yeah.
That's right. Yep. But I've never made this public before. So
now's the time. Recording Studio Rockstars.
I have a YouTube channel called Gear Dead.
Ooh.
And I am anonymous.
Gear Dead or Gear Dad?
I got to rename it to that. Gear Dead, all one word. And I'll probably always be anonymous on it, but If you're in the know, now you know who it is.
And
I've only got like 400 subscribers. I'm not like putting my life into it, but anyway, I'm mentioning it because it's a pedal. I just like go into pedals and have fun with them.
Yeah, that's cool. A lot of the sounds that I first heard of yours, like going on your Instagram and stuff, it was like you've taken the sax and running it through all this crazy distortion and weird stuff. And saxophone seems to be one of those instruments that lends itself really well to things like that. I guess it's because it's so expressive.
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
can also, it's very dynamic. You can be very quiet, and the combination of the deep tone and also like all the detail that comes from the reed and the expressiveness, the embouchure.
Yeah. Nice. Nice, Lij.
You know why I learned the word embouchure?
No, why?
Because I beat up horn players on an overdub session. I thought they could just play over and over all day long.
Oh my
gosh. And I learned like, oh, you can't do that.
No,
you have to actually know, you have to have an arrangement already.
Yeah.
They can only
brass players for sure.
Yeah.
You can get away with a lot. You can really beat a woodwind player to death. Not that you should.
He said live on the podcast.
Yeah. Oops. What am I doing?
What did I set myself up for?
Funny.
Well, dude, thanks for hanging with us, Rockstars. Thank you so much for watching.
Lij.
If you enjoyed this, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and smash the like button. We're saying kick the like button now.
Okay, there you go.
Stop the like button in guitar pedal.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Lance.
Stomp it. Let that feedback roll.
And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Lij. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me here.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: iZotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes. These are all things that I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. Also, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is new for us here, and it's a great way for you to help support this show, so I greatly appreciate it. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and for listening. My name is Lij Shaw, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.